I'm Naya, mom, boob nerd, board-certified lactation consultant, and lover of lipstick and curse words. I'm that weird Indian girl you knew in high school, all grown up.
And I'm Alexis, mom, birth nerd, and therapist plus doula, encouraging parents to hold joy plus what the fuck is this mess simultaneously. Some people think I'm too much, but those aren't my people. And we are the Top Knot Squad. TKS is a tiny little podcast about motherhood in real life, the good, the bad, the ugly AF.
Hosted by two women that are passionate about our beliefs and unafraid to speak our minds.
Friends that wanted to create space for all that ish we are too scared to talk about.
Are you ready to laugh, be vulnerable, and keep it real with us?
Top knots are not required.
If the Top Knot Squad content makes you laugh, nod in agreement, or makes you feel less alone, we'd love your support in the cost of producing this podcast. Visit patreon.com/TopKnotSquad to learn more about our budget-friendly sponsorship tiers and how you can help ensure that TKS has a future. Every little bit helps.
On today's episode, the squad is excited to tackle another episode around political activism as parents. It's a topic we discussed last season with Becky from the Rabble, where we focused on getting involved with government, elections, and staying educated. But this time around, we are thrilled to interview Sera Bonds on more hands-on activism and how to engage the whole family in the good fight for justice. Sera is a social justice activist committed to working towards balancing the scales of access, equity, and availability in sexual reproductive health care. She has training in midwifery, a Bachelor of Arts degree in women's studies, and a master's degree in public health. Her community organizing background ranges from reproductive rights to violence against women to welfare and poverty issues to pro-immigration campaigns. She has worked on sexual reproductive health actions in over 20 countries spanning North America, Africa, Asia, Central America, the Middle East, and the Caribbean, having raised over $20 million for political actions and public health programs impacting over 3 million women globally. She is the founder of a leading feminist global aid organization, Circle of Health International, and co-founder of Waking Giants, an ATX-based social impact company providing folks with the tools we need to do good. I did it.
I need to edit that shit. That's long. Sorry.
But what do you cut out, though? Yeah.
I don't know. Something. That's long. It's a little pretentious.
No, it was
Sorry.
perfect.
No, it's perfect. We're so happy you're here. Thank you for being here.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So for obviously the people in the studio we know, but Alexis is actually calling in today just because life. So we talk a lot about our podcast being about motherhood in real life, and it doesn't get much more real than sick children and having to juggle all kinds of things to make stuff work. So yeah, that's what's going on here.
I'm also very sleep deprived. So give me some grace. Also, just keep your fingers crossed that my husband actually keeps them out of this bedroom.
Well,
we'll have a different episode.
Yeah, that's okay. For one episode that we recorded at the end of, was it last season? Yeah, it was either last season or our first season. I can't remember, but it was like the season finale. We had partners come on. My babysitting fell through. My childcare fell through, only for my youngest, not for my oldest, but that's a longer story. But basically, we had to bring my youngest with us to the studio, and we gave him a tablet and the Wi-Fi password, and he was fine. But throughout the episode, you can periodically hear him yelling at us and going, "Guys, you're being too loud." So again, motherhood in real life, that's what we do here.
Yep.
So something new that we're trying this season is we're starting off every episode with a segment that we call What the Fuck or Fuck Yeah. So you can share something awesome that's happened to you recently or something not so great. And it doesn't have to be related to parenting. Alexis, do you want to go first and share?
Oh, my God. I have way too many what the fucks. How do I choose? Coronavirus is ruining my life, and we're supposed to leave Monday for Ireland and for a baby moon. And I don't know. Just all the things, all the feelings.
Girl, worst case scenario, you get stuck in the UK and you have a kid in a place with socialized medicine.
That's right.
Where midwives deliver in hospitals. I love this.
Yes. So Actually, my mother-in-law is supposed to be watching our kids while we're there. And she also is clearly anxious about us going and keeps saying, like, are we going to cancel? Like, why are we still going? And the last time we talked to her, she was like, what if y'all get sick while you're there and then you're stuck there and have to be quarantined? And my husband he was like, sounds like we're going to have a longer Irish holiday, Mom. Thanks. And then he also said, he was like, plus they have free healthcare.
Right.
Exactly.
Yep. I'm down with this plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get to rest.
Yeah,
Somebody else takes care of the other kids.
It's a hell of a birth story. All of it. Yeah.
We'll see what happens. But that's the what the fuck I choose.
So do you want to share one, Sarah?
Yeah. I mean, does it have to be like immediate or can it be
No.
So I just recently learned to surf. I took myself on my first trip by myself that wasn't like for a wedding or to meet a friend, definitely not work related, in 20 years.
Wow.
And I went to a place I'd never been, didn't know anybody, and I spent a week with a bunch of women that were strangers that are now my friends learning how to surf in Mexico. And it was magical. It was really great.
That's amazing.
That sounds like so much fun
Yeah.
for so many reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. And it's whaling season right now. So there were all these baby whales.
Oh.
And I was just sitting on my surfboard watching baby whales breach. It was exquisite.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was great.
That sounds incredible. Like definitely once in a lifetime bucket list.
Except
sort of
that
thing.
not. You can go every year.
I
and
know.
It's right there and they keep coming. So yes, once in a lifetime. And also, why did I wait so long and when do I do it again?
Yeah, exactly. That would probably be my first thought too.
Not being pregnant and having kids that are now 9 and 11 and as they do, only getting older. I think that I have entered a different phase and it's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like dipping my toes into that water now. And so yeah, I'm excited for what's to come as they get older.
It's pretty fun.
So I think I have a fuck yeah moment for once instead of a what the fucking complaining moment. And again, we happened to have a really fun date night over the weekend, and it was the day after, South by canceled because of all the scares with this COVID-19 stuff. And we usually we just go see a movie or something. But on Saturday, I was like, let's go to Rainy Street. Like, we don't ever do that. And let's just see how it is. Let's go support local businesses. Obviously, all these little bars and restaurants and all these places are going to be hurting because South by pulled out in such a major way. And so we went and we just chatted up every bartender we saw and left huge tips. And so, I mean, I'm sure in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to change a whole lot, but I feel like at least for one night, we let people know that we hear their concerns, we see them, we've validated what they do and just how big this whole cancellation is going to be for the ripple effect that it has on so many people. So, and not only that, it was a super fun date night. So it's always fun to go down and, have a couple drinks and not be mom and dad for a few hours.
Yes. Amen.
Yeah.
Yay.
Well, what do you think? Should we dive in, Alexis?
Yeah. Why don't we start, Sarah, if you don't mind, telling us a little bit about your story and kind of, I phrase this as when did you first identify with the label activist? So what was your journey to that title?
I think that I first identified with that label in my late 20s. I was raised by a radical feminist and a cowboy poet, and who instilled in me a deep sense of service, certainly. So that was always part of our orientation in the world, that we showed up when we could for other folks in different ways, participated in community stuff, church, schools, that sort of thing. And then I was late to go to college. I didn't go to college till I was 26. And when I did, I just dove in the deep end of the pool, as I do, and started working at the campus feminist organization. And then a year later was running the campus feminist organization and staffing a local abortion clinic, working on Take Back the Night, all of this stuff, and had some pretty powerful women in my life at that time who taught me a lot of the sort of primary tenets of organizing, especially in women's work, if, that is what this work is, sadly, mostly. Around, like, if you want people to show up, you always provide food and childcare and transportation.
Right.
If you're doing it alone, you're doing it wrong. You should never be by yourself. About boundary setting and not asking women, especially, to do work for free. So I think it was probably then that I started to identify as an activist. I don't think that I called myself that really, though. For a while, I called myself a humanitarian, and that felt much safer. And because of the organization that I founded and led for a long time, we very pragmatically chose that label. It was a humanitarian, not a human rights organization, because we wanted to be able to get into places and work with women regardless of politics or party politics. And that enabled us to do that. That was a good choice until the 2016 election, when we decided that that was a flag we no longer wanted to wave as an organization led by white women, that felt like it lacked courage. And so we put that one down and we picked up the human rights flag, and they continue to wave that one. But they do so with still a tremendous amount of empathy and a nonpartisan approach, which is really required in humanitarian work.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you said that. I feel, especially when you hear the label activist or feminist or really any kind of an ist, for most people, it's a knee-jerk reaction, and it's not always a positive one. So for you to specifically call out that the work that the organization does, that you do, is bipartisan, nonpartisan, even, if you will, and it applies just to humans, that's significant for sure.
Well, one of the first projects that we had, so I founded this organization called Circle of Health in 2004, and we worked around the world. And, well, the organization still does, but I stepped down from my CEO role there last January in 2019. So when we first started, our first two projects were Gaza and Tibet. And our board at that time had caught, like, they really didn't know what they were doing. I didn't know what we were doing. We were all just making it up every day. And they were like, why don't we pick a hard one and a hard conflict and a soft conflict? And ironically, Gaza was the hard one and Tibet was the soft. Did not actually turn out that way at all. Tibet is a very, very difficult place to work from the altitude that you are resting at 16,000, 17,000 feet every day. You're so close to the sun. My hair turned orange and fell out. And
wow.
We got super altitude sickness all the time because the air was so thin.
Right.
The food was crap. I hear it is not this way anymore, for better or worse. A lot of dried yak, jerky, yak, milk, yak, cheese. Terrible.
You got kind of yacked out, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit. But we also were, because you're working in China, you are highly surveilled. And so we had Chinese people who went with us everywhere we went. Like, there was just a lot of politics that, I had spent time in Dharamsala, where the Dalai Lama hangs out, and had experienced sort of Tibet light. That's what my husband and I call it. This like the friendlier iteration of it, which is, I think, truer to what it naturally was. But that is not what Tibet itself is anymore, because it's occupied. And it was not soft. It was very hard. And so the sponsoring organization that had invited us there to do this midwifery assessment had to have a real sort of come to Jesus conversation with us very early on, because it was going to be dangerous for them to have us there if we engaged in any kind of political work anywhere. And so the director of that organization sat me down. He's like, look, I believe in what you're doing. You're smart. You're capable. You're competent. You're going to do great. But you got to decide what camp you're in. Are you a humanitarian or are you an activist? And so we decided that the organization was humanitarian, but I myself have always been an activist. But the work was what mattered, and so if I needed to put that away for a while, that seems like the right thing to do.
Where did you meet your husband, or where was he in this timeline?
He was my first intern.
Love it.
He was also my epidemiology tutor because I was failing. I passed. That I met him in graduate school. He is much younger than me. And
Gotcha.
had not gotten into medical school the first time he applied. And so somebody was like, just go get an MPH, a master's in public health. That'll be filler. Meanwhile, I'm like struggling through this degree. It was so hard for me. And he's like coming in late, leaving early, doing crossword puzzles in class, acing all of the exams. I was failing epidemiology. I'd gotten like a 30 on my midterm. And the teacher was like, you need a tutor. And I said, I don't have any money for a tutor. And he was like, what about that kid Adam? And I was like, what? That kid? Like, who comes in early and leaves late and asks you all kinds of obnoxious questions you don't know the answer to? He's like, yeah, he seems to have a pretty good grasp on the stuff. So then I was like checking him out in the lobby the next day, trying to be like, should I ask this guy to tutor me? And I was like, well, maybe I should seduce him first. So I did.
And it all worked out.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I was just curious because I was just thinking while you were talking about, we have the question here about what changed about your activism when you became a parent. But I started to think about for a lot of folks, they're parenting in a partnership. Not all folks, of course. But I know for me, my husband is so far from activist, humanitarian, not that he's a terrible human. That's not what I'm saying. But as far as when we, merged our worlds, he was like, whoa, who is this person? And all these things that she talks about and wants to do. And so I've kind of had to drag him along for the ride. And I think that that's impacted how we, our parenting and even some of the conflicts that have come up about how do we do this.
Yeah, we've shared that too. I mean, Adam, it's interesting because he's a pediatrician, a special needs pediatrician in Austin. And I think that when people look at okay, so one of you has a master's degree, doesn't make a lot of money, does a lot of stuff for free, builds companies that to date do not make a tremendous amount of money, although make a lot of impact. And then I have, the other is a doctor with a master's degree in public health. He would appear to be the one of the ambition, but he is not. I am the one with the ambition. He would be so happy to go to clinic every day for the rest of his days and somebody hands him a stack of folders and he just sees his patients and has the same burrito at the same food truck every day. He's living his best life. He loves this. And I'm like, all right, we have a verb. I guess we've turned it into a verb. We call it when Sarah snow globes it. And so I take the snow globe and I shake it. Uh-huh. And he would never do that, right? He just loves to watch the snow globe. But all the time, I just I move all the furniture around in our house because I need change, or
right.
And we have a lot of conflict around that because I don't want to live in suburban Austin and I am very happy with the life that I had now, but it was not the life we agreed on. And so we make agreements about that allow me to live my best life and to support him in living his best life.
Yeah, I really resonate with that because, I don't know that we've figured it out.
Oh, God, no. Certainly not over here.
Same. Well, just to add to that conversation, a lot of what you said resonated with me too. Just, again, my husband sounds a lot like yours. He's happy to just do the same thing every day. Like you said, eat at the same place, get the same meal, the same way, drink this, all of that. But I'm very much like, hey, we should go do this, or I'm going to go do this. Lately, to be honest with you, I've realized that I'm not going to make a huge dent in him. So I'm like, okay, well, then you can support me by taking on some of, this mental load that women and mothers typically have. You can handle the kids and shuttle this person to this birthday party and take that one to soccer and all of this stuff. And then just let me go live my best life. Yeah. And so, it's not perfect and agree. And there's totally conflicts around. There's so much conflict surrounding that. But, sometimes it's what we have to do in the interim until we kind of figure out what comes next.
Yeah. My husband comes from a very service-oriented family, but I wouldn't say an activism-oriented family. They're, his family, his parents right now are in Ethiopia volunteering. They are always volunteering all around the place. Mm-hmm. But it's a very gentle approach. They would never assume to put their beliefs hardly even out on the table. Like, they're very much to each their own kind of family. Yet they do a lot of service work. And I really, really, really value that about them.
Yeah.
Which I think helps with Adam, my husband, that, I'm like, all right, there's this protest, there's this rally, we're going, which is different than like, okay, the food kitchen needs volunteers.
Right.
Like those two things are different.
Yeah.
And working with our kids so that they understand the difference in those two things. In my mind, both of those things are things you do in equal parts, but they have different impacts and different outcomes.
Yeah.
Can you verbalize what the difference might be?
Sure. So at the food kitchen, you're showing up to be of service, right? Like there are people in need of a thing. You are there to do the thing. You check your dogma at the door. You follow the directions of the people who are there to help you, tell you how to serve the soup or mop the floor or whatever. You make conversation. You're kind. You're not judgmental. You get to, especially for those of us who come from a lot of privilege, like I do and my kids do, it's an opportunity for us to remind ourselves that there are very diverse experiences on the planet and that we need to be doing more to lift other people up. So there's doing, but it's also a lot of learning. It's very, you're taking as much as you're giving, truly. But a rally or a protest is much more like it's all external, especially the way that we do it, I guess. Like we make signs. I have signs in my car at all points in time. Should we just be somewhere and we're like, oh, what are they up to? All right, let's go talk to them. Let's go see what they're doing. And those are opportunities for learning of a different kind for the kids. There's a lot of also listening and watching. But we tend to have very different conversations after a rally or a protest than we do after some service time. I take my kids to the border very regularly to volunteer. And those conversations afterward tend to be like, oh, I wonder what that kid is going to do now because he doesn't get to go to school or he doesn't know where his friends are. It's not very, it's individual, it's not like, oh, let's talk about the Remain in Mexico policy and what that led to. And, it's more about the people that they meet. But when we go to rallies, they tend to come away with questions about like we were doing some death penalty rallying earlier this year or I guess that was last year. And so they had a lot of really incredible questions about the death penalty and like, why would we do that? And where did that come from? And how do I feel about that? And, trying as parents to present things based just the information and not have it be biased about my own values or my own biases and let them come away with their own opinions about it. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
No, it does. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so just kind of on that note, can you talk a little bit about how your activism changed or maybe even evolved once you became a parent?
Well, running a maternal health organization and being a midwife who'd not had a baby, that sure shifted. Sure thought I knew what that was all about. Didn't. Spoiler, didn't know. Now I do. But I only know the two ways that my babies came.
Right.
Those are my lived experience ways. I think it just got a lot more personal for me. It became much less academic and theoretical, and I think I became much more, I could identify more closely with the women that we served. And I was much less likely to get on a plane for no good reason. I needed to understand that like my presence was needed in the place, and it wasn't like if somebody else could do it who wasn't going to be leaving children behind, then they needed to go do that. And I would stay home. Before the kids came, I would spend months in the field at a time. But then I didn't. Yeah, I think those are probably the two primary ways that it changed.
And then at what point did you start engaging them in the work?
Always. Naz was in Gaza when he was like 8 weeks old. They've always gone where we go. We've always talked to them about what it is. I mean, Naz was born in Nazareth, which is what he's named after. He's my oldest. He's 11. My husband was in medical school in Israel, and I was running a project between Israeli and Palestinian midwives, a coexistence project. And Naz was born in October, and in mid-December, missiles started falling in our neighborhood. We lived 20 miles from Gaza. And we lived in an old house that did not have a bomb shelter. Most modern houses in Israel have bomb shelters in them and apartment buildings. But we lived in an old house in an old neighborhood, and you had to run through the streets to a bomb shelter underground. And so I had a less than 2-month-old baby and was having this experience. And my husband was taking medical school exams in bomb shelters. And so that got real fast.
Yeah.
I forgot what the question was. That was rambling.
When did you start engaging your kids in the work?
So I guess I share that story to say they have been a part of the work in a very personal way since the beginning. Like they've lived it with us. Bodie, the second one, who was born here in Austin, we didn't have any health insurance. He was a Medicaid baby. We went to Canada to have our prenatal care when we were on the East Coast for things. So, as far as he was a political baby. We didn't have health insurance.
Right.
We had, both my kids are circumcised. That was a political and religious decision that my husband and I have very strong disagreements about, but that's the way that it shook out. Yeah. Does that
Sarah,
one resonate?
I need your help on that. we don't know what we're having, and we have very polar, strong opinions. Me one way, him the other on circumcision.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, if this is a boy, are we gonna survive?
Yeah, you will.
I don't know, man. How did you manage that?
Oh, now that my children know what circumcision is. Very, they went to their cousin's bris recently, and the 9-year-old was like, "What the hell is this?" He was so mad. He's like, "You did this to me?" And I was like, "Take it to your dad. This was your dad's decision." And
burn.
And he was like, "Dad." And Adam was like, "Look, dude, this is what we do. All of your grandparents' relatives died in fires and in a camp. This is a very important thing to your grandparents, and I was not gonna deny them that. And, you probably don't understand. You might not ever, but this was a decision that I had to make as a parent. And I'm sorry, that you disagree with it. You should certainly not feel obligated, should you have children, to do this, but this is the decision that we made." And then I always yell, you made. But I mean, the thing about circumcising a baby is that, there are so many things about circumcising a baby, but the first circumcision happened in Israel. It was so different than the one that happened in Austin. Our house was it got out in the neighborhood that there was a bris, and my house was overrun by Iraqi Jews who didn't even speak Hebrew. They just were running around, took my baby out of my hands and were dancing him around in the air. And I'm post C-section, I'm super sore. I'm what the hell is going on here? And then one of my husband's cousins, who's a mother of 3 sons, says to me, "No one expects you to be here." And I just looked at her and I was like, why the fuck would we do something to our children that we can't watch?
Right.
This makes no sense to me. But it was it was me against a tide, right? And so I just walked down the street. I smoked a cigarette. I drank a glass of wine. I sat on my friend's porch and I was like, okay, it's probably over now. I'm going to go back. And then I just took the baby and I locked myself in the nursery, and every diaper that was changed for the next, I don't know how long, Adam changed, because I was not looking at any blood. I didn't want to see. I'm sure there are a gajillion people who have a mountain of judgments that are worthy against me and how I acquiesced on these two things. But this is marriage, and it's parenting, and it's all of those things.
Well, our son is circumcised. Our first son is circumcised, and we were in the same spot, agonized until the last second, because he was born in a hospital. And of course they were coming in every second. What are you going to do? And I just look at Ben, what are we going to do, Ben?
Yep.
And finally he was just we're going to circumcise him. And I just sobbed in the bed in fetal position.
I know.
And I was,
so
I didn't want to hear about it. Same thing. I think I made him change his diapers, but I just, this time, then our second was a girl. So thankfully we didn't have to go there.
Lucky
which
dodge.
Is, which is ironic to me when we're, in the conversation of circumcision, which I know this topic is not supposed to be about circumcision. I'm sorry I brought it there, but
it's a political decision that we make as parents, and I don't think that we often treat it that way. Like my two best friends are dudes, and this whole time when we're pregnant with, I guess we didn't know the sex of either of them. So it was afterwards, I guess, after Naz was circumcised. They were like, I don't know what you're fussing about. Like, at least they got parties. Nobody gave me a party. Like, I was just in a hospital. Somebody cut it off and sent me home,
Yeah.
And I'm like, ugh, guys, come on. No. You can do better than that.
Man.
Come on. But it is a political decision. And I think that that's sort of the entry point for this conversation with people who don't fancy themselves activists or political, but are parents, is that even becoming a parent is a political choice. And then how you parent, where do you have the baby? How do you feed the baby? What does the baby wear? Like, all of these things are political decisions. And they deserve, we don't need to obsess over them, but they do deserve due diligence.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I read or heard or saw somewhere a long time ago that parenting is political. And it was before I had children. And I was like, the fuck? It's not political. You have a baby. Yeah, no, I was really wrong. Like, almost a decade into this, you're absolutely right. Everything that we do with our children, for our children, with our children in mind, is political.
Public school, private school. I mean, all of it.
Yes.
All of it.
Which I guess is the answer to that question of, like, when did you start engaging them in the work? I mean, you're engaging them before they're even conceived.
Yeah.
Right.
and in utero.
Yeah. I mean, when we were pregnant in Israel, we were like, do we have a baby in Israel or do we have a baby in the West Bank? Like, which passport is harder to navigate the world in? Do you have a baby at home? Do you have a baby in the hospital for people who have those choices? I mean, it's all a political decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whew.
Our next question, this is one from me specifically. So one of my children, my oldest, he's an anxious child. He's sensitive. He tends to internalize everything. So basically, he's just like his mom. How do you balance just kind of the gritty real life exposure? Like you mentioned, for instance, bringing your kids to the border with Mexico and having them help there. How do you balance just kind of the gritty real world aspect of life to just letting them be a kid?
Well, I don't know that I do it well, so let's start with that. I do not mean to present that the way that I'm doing it is the right way. It's just the way that we're doing it. I have an empath as an older child and a very empathetic and righteous introvert as a 9-year-old, the younger one. So they're really different kids, but they both have a tremendous amount of empathy and get there differently. And so when we are doing, we are conscious in the work part of the work that we do together as a family, we have to pay very close attention to how the two of them are doing with that. So, for example, the last time I went to the border, it was me and the two of them. Adam didn't join us on that trip. And it was the first time we went to Matamoros, which is across the border now since the Remain in Mexico policy started, and people are no longer on the American side. Now they're being stuck on the Mexican side. So it's a very different environment. For the last many years that we've been going down, we go to McAllen, we stay in a Hyatt, we have Starbucks in the morning, we go down the street to the Catholic Charities place. They mop floors. They sit on the floor and play Legos. They serve food. We go back to the hotel with the pool and the gym, right? Very hygienic and, easy as far as creature comforts and that sort of thing. But now when you cross the bridge into Matamoros, you're in a refugee camp. So it's 10 porta potties for 2,000 people. That's where my kids are going to the bathroom. The water is all brought in trucks that smell like swimming pools. That's the water everybody drinks. The food is cooked on camp stoves that women have built in this soccer field where they are feeding their kids. There's no school. The kids don't have shoes. There is a tremendous amount of anxiety and trauma just right there, which is there was in McAllen on the other side also. It just felt different because you were like, there was a Disney movie playing in the background and like you had a Starbucks cup in your hand, right? So like it feels different. So my oldest one is an extrovert. He's like, let's go play soccer. He's out there. He's holding babies. He doesn't speak a word of Spanish, but he's like the mayor, right? He's like making friends, really like out there in his way, showing people that he is there to help. The introvert watches and waits for an opportunity for him to engage in a meaningful way to him. So for what that means for him right now is like building or carrying or doing something with his body, which is actually how he moves through a lot of that anxiety. And so he spent his day while my 11-year-old led this like impromptu art class for the kids that he met and was out playing soccer and holding babies. The 9-year-old buddied up with this guy who was going around and building toilet roll holders for the porta potties. He got to use power tools all day. He stuck with one guy, right? They had a great time. And he felt like at the end of the day, he'd built 3 things. And that felt very satisfactory to him. We helped them process this stuff differently. We went back to the hotel that night, and the 9-year-old was like writing very sad, epic poetry like he does, right? Like the world is on fire, which it is. Like none of it was wrong, right? And the 11-year-old just wanted to talk to me and ask me questions about the things that he'd observed. The anxiety that they feel is real. And I don't try to shut any of that down. I'm sure that you, as the mom, know what they need to do to move it out of their bodies, which is really the key thing, right? Especially for boys. Like they just, again, like I totally didn't believe this shit about boys and girls being different until I had 2 boys. So different. They need to move it out of their bodies. So we really try to ensure that they have a lot of physical activity on the days that they're exposed to things that make them nervous. And we try really hard not to discount the anxiety that they feel. I can't imagine growing up knowing everything that they know. Right. On this same trip that I was just it was a trip before when we were still on the McAllen side. We woke up in the morning, we're having breakfast in the hotel, and I couldn't find the 9-year-old. I was like, where did he go? He was just here. So I'm just wandering around looking. And I see that he has sat down in front of a television, and the El Paso shootings at the Walmart had just happened. And so it's all over the TV, and he's sitting there eating his waffles on the floor of this hotel lobby. And I walk over, and I was like, hey, why don't you come over and sit with us? And he just looked up at me, and he said, just another fucking day in America.
Wow.
And I was like, all right, not going to, yep, you nailed it. Yep. You need to just, okay, I'll be over here when you need to talk to me.
Yeah.
So again, I don't know that we're doing any of this right, but this is how we're doing it.
Yeah.
We let them swear.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. They're gonna do it anyway, let's be honest.
Totally.
Oh, I was just going to say, even from a trauma perspective, like, most mammals need to move their body after trauma.
Yeah.
Or after, witnessing it. So if like, you think of like the gazelle and, a lion is chasing it, it plays dead, it's in a freeze response. Well, then if you keep watching, it's going to like shake its body because it has to discharge all this energy that it's been holding inside in order to recalibrate, essentially.
I don't think I'd ever articulated this, but I just thought of this while you're saying it. I parent in a trauma-informed way. That is how we parent, both my husband and I. We have a lot of training and the same sort of stuff. And we, like, on my way over here, I was like, okay, I'm going to the border tomorrow. I'll get home on Thursday, just in time for Bodhi's school play. Then I booked myself a float at the zero gravity place because that is a really powerful way for me to get the trauma out of my body that I will see tomorrow when I'm down there. And, so I just texted my husband. I was like, oh, hey, heads up. I know that I will have been gone for 36 hours, but I'm also going to go do this thing on Thursday night. And he gets it, He's like, great. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It's good to know what to do for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to impart that information to your kids.
Yeah, you're modeling that.
Yeah.
We're trying real hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was just going to say. Just letting them know that it's okay to go and do something for themselves after seeing this or doing so much work for other people is really powerful, because I feel like if we don't acknowledge that we need to do this, then it's just going to be all of that pent up energy, and they're just at some point it's going to explode.
Yeah. We're trying.
Which I guess is, you're already getting at one of our other questions about, how do you balance your own wellness and self-care with just the heaviness of this type of work? Are there other things that you do outside of what you just talked about?
I'm getting a lot better at it. I wish I had been better at it 15 years ago. Certainly one of the things that I do, so I'm getting up in the morning and driving down to the border. I'm doing an anti-racism training for a bunch of public health volunteers down there tomorrow afternoon. I'm taking the medical team out for dinner, and then I'm getting back in my car, and I'm driving to the beach. And I'm going to get up on Thursday morning, and I'm going to surf, and then I'm going to drive back. And a year ago, I would have just driven back, or gone back to the hotel and written email and gotten on the internet and tried to raise more money, because, I will definitely be feeling that tomorrow, that they don't have enough resources. But I also need to fill up my own resources. And I no longer take that lightly. It is as much a part of the work as getting in the car and driving down and showing up and knowing the content of the thing that I'm there to teach about, and showing up with the right supplies and all of that. Just as important is okay, you just totally ran your tank down. What are you going to do to fill it back up? Mm-hmm. That is not an extra or like a bonus. It is a part of the work. So I go to float as often as I can. That's really good for me. When I'm gone for a while and I'm immersed in a really hard thing, we have like a sort of step-by-step re-entry process for Sera, which is my husband has this playlist that will absolutely get me crying. Like if I haven't cried, this will set it going. I don't go shopping, because like the choice, like the overwhelming presentation of all of the choices really makes me mad, which is not helpful to anyone. So I avoid shopping for a couple days. I also probably shouldn't socialize with people that I can't really be honest with, like no small talking. Like I was in the Middle East a couple of years ago at this really big refugee camp in Jordan, and there were riots and all sorts of stuff happening. And I got home and went like from the airport to a Zilker Elementary School fundraiser.
Oh, wow.
And I was such an asshole. Should not have done that. I'm lucky those people still talk to me. I'm sure I was a real beast. So I don't do that anymore. And I sleep. I sleep a lot. Sleep is a really restorative place for me.
I found that as well. Just even with regular work, like day job, non-activism stuff, which again, what I do is political. Just as a lactation consultant, when you're holding space for people whose birth didn't go as planned or breastfeeding isn't going as planned, that's draining on me. And so even if I'm seeing just 4 or 5 clients a day, I'm still spending an hour to 90 minutes with them every time. And then I have to kind of relive all of that as I'm charting. So for me, I've been today was a day off for me. I slept in. I helped get my kids out the door, and then I went right back to sleep until 10:30. So
good for you.
People are like, "Oh, what do you do for fun?" I'm like, "I sleep." Like, it seems like such a crappy answer, but I wake up and I feel completely different. So I'm right there with you. Yeah.
We sleep a lot. My husband has a pretty tough job too. He takes care of the 400 sickest kids in the city, and goes to a lot of baby funerals and toddler funerals, and has to deliver a lot of heavy news. He's a person who's very well, like his nervous system reboots really quickly. He's just one of those like naturally joyful people. Thank God. He brings the joy. I'm trying to learn how to do that, but he certainly just does it very naturally. And so that was also just a realization, right? That like we can't both be that empty all the time. And I loved what I did being a full-time humanitarian all the time, but He worked so hard in medical school and residency. I really want to be able to return the favor to him someday that he is giving me now in supporting me while I'm building a company. In 10 years, hopefully this company is big and beautiful and I can move on to the next thing. And we have enough money in the bank that he gets to take a year to just like make pots or learn to surf or whatever it is that he wants, go to fish shows, which is probably what he'll do with his time. But we are so lucky that we love what we do, that our nervous systems, his certainly is well suited for it. Mine does okay. But it isn't like either of us can do this forever. You got to take breaks from it. And I feel so lucky that I have found a way to continue to make an impact where I am 100% rooting myself in joy, which is very different than what I did for the last 16 years. So my days just like even going to the border tomorrow to do, a couple hours worth of hard work feels so different because today I had meetings where we laughed a lot and, we're designing candles and we're doing other, it's really different and it's it's deeply restorative to me.
Yeah.
Well, can you talk about that a little bit? Share about Waking Giants and like how our listeners could get involved or.
Yeah. So I brought you guys a box that you can't see because you're not here with us, but here it is. Anyway.
Bummer.
So when I was leaving Circle of Health, so in the spring of 2018, when I gave the board my notice and was like, let's take a year, but I'm out. Let's make a transition here. One of the things that I really wanted to keep doing was this initiative that we had cooked up at Circle of Health that we were calling Activate Us. And it was a subscription model income generating initiative, which lots of nonprofits have, right? You got to find a reliable income stream somewhere. So we tried this out and we built out 18 different months for this subscription service. And it was all through the lens of reproductive justice. And so you would sign up and you'd get this box to your door on a variety of topics: climate change, men and feminism, women in education, how to run for office, all sorts of different things. But because we were, running a disaster organization, we didn't have the time to really build that out. So when I left, I asked the board if I could take it with me and turn it into a for-profit company. And they were like, yes, please go. So that was my intention. And I started to ramp this up with 2 long-term volunteers that we'd had at Circle of Health. We were, building this out as a company. And then I had a friend in Austin who was like, hey, psst, there's somebody over here who's doing this too. And you guys are going to you're going to hate how much you love each other. Like you really should not be doing this on your own. So sure enough, we met and I was like, oh my God, you're so amazing at the things that I am not amazing at. and so Martha Pinkoffs, who's this incredible local Austinite, who's a brand builder, she was building a brand called Waking Giants that did not have a tremendous amount of content. So I brought the content, she brought the brand, and here we are. And so essentially we provide tools for people to do good. And it looks a lot of different ways. It looks like this subscription service that we have here, this box. It's a quarterly subscription service delivered to your door. And it's nonpartisan on purpose. It's very important to us that these kits are about issues, but not about politics. And so each kit has, this is the full deal kit that I brought for you guys. So there's a really artful candle and some Palo Santo and some really beautiful art. There's actually a coloring book by a local artist named Casey Chapman Ross that's How to Be a Gun Activist.
I have, Alexis, you can't see this, but we got a big version of this. We went to the Rabble podcast that we had mentioned. They did a big season closer last year, and it was a live podcast. And Alexis and I went and we splurged for the VIP tickets, and we got a different coloring book, but also by Casey Chapman Ross in that. And I was so wowed by how pretty the artwork was, but how impactful it was as well. Mm-hmm.
It's really pretty amazing. So this is How to Be a Gun Safety Activist, and it's great. So the intention for these kits are that you can use them anywhere, anytime. They have those 2 booklets that you're holding. One is a zine that has background and historical information as well as poetry and art. And then the other is the call to action guide that has very clear calls to action, from like things you can do on social media to things you can do with your kids to calls you can make to events that you can host, like depending on where you fall on the spectrum. And so these come every quarter. The next one is the election survival kit. That again is not partisan.
Right.
It's not about who you vote for. It's about how the government works. We've got like this really incredible map about gerrymandering. We've got a glossary of all of these terms that we think maybe we know, but don't maybe know, like filibuster and like these goofy, weird political words.
Right.
Civics 101, like how did the government happen? Why? And how did we get to where we are today? So that's the subscription service. And then we have something called the Good Fight Club for people who want to do this work in community with other people, because certainly not everybody does. My sister is a climate change activist in her own right, and she is an introvert, and she does this shit on her own.
Okay.
She does not want to hang out with the people, but she does tremendous work and makes a big impact. So the Good Fight Club is like if you're those things you're already doing, like you have a book club or you have a wine club or you have a Sunday supper where people come over. We invite people to use some content that we produce to provide actions and to have an impact-focused meetup. So we have immigration kits for download, we have gun rights, and we have some others as well. And all of those are a $10 download on the website. And then we have Good Fight delegations. Like this trip I'm doing tomorrow down to the border, we provide service opportunities for people, but this is not like voluntourism. We require a lot of pre-work of the folks that we work with on anti-racism and understanding the role that we play in inequity and injustice, and then how to really show up and be of service. And we are just now launching something called Waking Giants EDU. And this is programming that we're building out for schools and businesses who want to have more of a social impact and also maybe need a refresher on sexual harassment and diversity in the workplace. We're really catering it to businesses and schools. So we get the tools. We're here to make the tools so that they meet the needs of folks wherever they're at.
Very cool. And easily accessible, too. Yeah.
We're trying.
Yeah.
We're trying. Yeah.
Well, Top Knot Squad is hoping to engage our listeners in an event sometime after I have a baby and recover.
But before the election, to hopefully get out and make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an offline conversation for sure.
It's a big year, folks. It's a big year. We got to pace ourselves.
Yeah.
And keep our eyes on the prize.
For sure. Well, we will definitely be linking to how to get a hold of you, Waking Giant specifically, in all of our show notes. So if our listeners want to check it out, if they want to hopefully subscribe or learn how they can do more and be more active in the community and in the world around them, we'll have links to all of that.
Great. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. Anything else, Alexis?
Do we want to ask the Squad Wants to Know question?
Oh, yeah.
She kind of talked about it a little bit.
Yeah. Maybe you can expand on it. Go ahead.
Well, we typically end all of our episodes with any listener questions that were submitted. And so we had one that said, ultimately, I want my children to decide their own stances on political issues. How do you embrace activism without being an influencer? Which you touched on a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's just about... my mom has this theory that you can't teach morality without religion, and I don't agree with that. I think that you can teach morality without an ism of any kind. You can just, our children are so smart, and they are picking up on everything, and just exposing them to as many different kinds of, like I'm from Arkansas. I'm from rural Arkansas, and we were in Arkansas at Christmas, and we were out for a walk, and we walked past, you couldn't tell what it was from a distance. It was just like a bunch of people standing outside a house in a neighborhood with a bunch of signs. And my kids are like, oh, let's go see what's going on over there. And I was like, all right, let's go over. And it was an abortion provider, and it was an anti-abortion protest in front of this provider's house, and which happens in the South too commonly. And I was like, and the kids were confused. They were like, the pictures were terrifying, right? Like bloody and violent. And the children were like, what is this? And I was like, well, these people think that this specific medical procedure should not be available to people. And they're entitled to that opinion, and this is, they're describing, maybe not as scientifically as I would agree with, a procedure that happens. They have strong feelings about it, which they live in America and are entitled to have. Why don't you go ask them some questions? Mm-hmm. And so we went over and we had a conversation. And then my son, the oldest one, was like, but Mom, aren't you an abortion rights activist? And I was like, I am. And the lady was like, oh my God. I was like, it's cool. Like, I'm so glad that you are out here speaking your truth. You know, like, this is what's true to you. It's fine with me. Mm-hmm. As long as you also let me say what's true to me. And we don't hurt anybody in the process.
Right.
And, then she's like, but these fetuses are getting hurt. And I was like, well, I disagree.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yep.
It's okay.
Oh, my God.
As long as we live in a world where all of these things are still legal and accessible, this can continue to be a civil discourse.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the only person laughing, but I'm like dead at the imagery of this scene. I'm sorry.
I mean, I come from conservative people in a conservative place, so it is not uncommon for me and my children to be the only people in a place who feel a certain way. Like, my family in Arkansas hosts this insane gathering called the National Chuck Wagon Races. And I say insane because it's 30,000 people, trucks, beers, horses, guns. It's like this massive, massive event. And, the kids have been going there all the time. But after the 2016 election, it felt, or actually it was September, so it was right before this specific story I'm about to tell. And I drive a Prius, right? And like you park in this field and it's like GMC trucks in our tiny little Prius. And all of these people in Trump t-shirts and like Trump stickers on their cars. And our kids live here,
Yeah.
And I do not speak badly about him. I wish he was not my president, but I respect the office of the presidency and I believe in democracy, and this is what happened in a democracy. And sometimes you fight really hard and your side doesn't win. Doesn't mean you don't keep fighting. So anyway, this is before the election. We're there. And my children are just so confused. Like, they are so visibly confused. Mm-hmm. And they think it's irony. They're like, oh, these people are being ironic. It's like, no, they're not. So I'm going to ask that you guys just don't bring it up, okay? There's a gajillion other things we can talk about. Talk about horses, talk about steak, talk about the lakes, talk about the boots or the trucks. But, like, let's just leave this one off the table today. And they did a really good job until we were at this tiny, tiny restaurant, Western Sizzling, which some people on your listening might know. And it's this, like, rural buffet kind of place. And so we're sitting there, and this big white man with a large mustache and hat and a big Trump button on his hat walks by, and my 9-year-old just looks at him and is like, "Are you a racist?" And I was like, But also in this part of the world, like, children don't talk to adults like that, right? So he was just mostly so confused. Like, why is this small person with this, is this a boy or a girl? Like, this person has a lot of hair and they're wearing like a lot of, I don't know, like, what is this creature that's talking to me this way? And I was like, sorry, sir, chicken fried steak's great today. I really suggest it. And I just looked at Bodhi and I was like, dude, come here. So we went outside and I was like, look, we're in their house, right? This is their house. You don't walk into somebody else's house and bring up the shit that makes the people who own the house uncomfortable. That's rude. It's bad manners. We're here. This is where they live. We don't live here. And, I love your opinions. I love that you feel strongly about them. I'm not going to tell you any other way, but just understand that when you as a small person say something like that in this part of the country to a person who clearly feels a way, there's going to be a reaction. And you just need to know that that's what you're walking into. Like, make a choice. And he's like, oh, all right. But that 9-year-old will choose that fight any day. any day.
I love it.
And so I am trying really hard in this era of like such intense polarization to teach my children that the people who disagree with us are not our enemies, that there is a lot of commonality and there should always be love and respect. The world is not with me on that one, but I'm trying real hard.
Yeah.
Whew. Well, man, we need a part 2 like most of our topics.
For sure. Well,
yeah.
Thank you so much
thanks for having me.
This was great. Like, I feel like, can you just come back and we can ask you more questions?
I can come back anytime.
Just tell us more cool experiences.
We are going to need a lot of these kinds of conversations in the coming months, to remind us that the world is full of phobia and fear. It doesn't mean that we have to be.
Yeah.
I love it.
Perfect. That's it. Well, thank you so much
Sera.
for joining us.
Have fun in Ireland having a baby.
Thanks.
If the Top Knot Squad's content makes you laugh, nod in agreement, or makes you feel less alone, we'd love your support in the cost of producing this podcast. Visit patreon.com/TopKnotSquad to learn more about our budget-friendly sponsorship tiers and how you can help ensure that TKS has a future. Every little bit helps.
If you like what you hear, then be sure to click the subscribe button in your podcast app. While you're there, leave us a review. You can find us on social media. Just search for Top Knot Squad. We welcome your feedback and love making new friends.